Hi. I have so many questions. So many. I watched Genie Make a Wish this weekend, and if you are as confused about this drama as I am, um, watch this first portion. But if you're here for the actual review part where I talk about the story itself, jump to this timestamp. Okay, so what what happened? Okay, let's start with talking about the actual production timeline of this drama. It was announced in 2023 by Hua and Dam Pictures, which is the production company that actually made the drama. Netflix stepped in May of 2024, which is next year. But the filming of the drama had already started by then. Some or maybe all of the Dubai sequences were shot in February of 2024. And after Netflix stepped in May, we don't know what happened, but we do know that in August, the original director, Lee Byung-hyun, decided to step down, ostensibly for personal reasons. And director An Gil-ho of The Glory and a bunch of other dramas you've watched, including the Japanese version of Marry My Husband. I did not know that while it was airing. I found out later. I was very surprised. Anyway, he stepped in August, and then 2 months later, the filming wrapped up. So we do know that majority of the filming happened under the direction of the first director. And I guess the wrap up happened under the direction of An Gil-ho. Now, there doesn't necessarily have to be any kind of conspiracy to this. Sometimes directors have to step back because of personal reasons. And An Gil-ho has been working with Netflix pretty regularly, as has Kim Eun-sook. So it kind of makes sense that Netflix would want to help by bringing in a seasoned director to sort of complete the project so it doesn't get abandoned or pushed back any further. But I guess the interesting thing is that neither of them is mentioned in the top credits where directors usually are placed. Instead, only Kim Eun-sook is, who is the writer. And I guess I find that curious. Like, even if you have to step back mid-production, if majority of the filming has been done under your direction, shouldn't you get credited for it? Anyway, moving away from conspiracy theories and whether or not either or both directors wanted to take responsibility for this, another aspect that I found really interesting is the really lackluster promotional content. Like, this drama had an entire year for post-production. It should have had a very polished finish, as well as a really impressive marketing period. But the poster for this got released like a month back, and it was very unimpressive. It seemed like the kind of poster a fan would make after just having learned how to do face swapping on Photoshop. People were unimpressed. The trailer also felt like really abrupt and didn't really give us a very, again, I'm going to repeat this word a lot, a polished feel to things. But we were hoping that sometimes trailers are just cut badly, but the drama itself isn't. Like, if you guys remember how Alchemy of Souls had a really trash trailer, which just confused everybody. We couldn't figure out what the tone or the quality of the drama actually was going to be. But when the drama released, it was so good. I think that was the hope here. My personal reservations were about the clearly Middle Eastern setting and origins of the male lead. I didn't look up anything about the story. I didn't even read the synopsis because I was like, I'm going to find out once the drama actually starts airing. And oh boy, did I find out. Which is why I'd completely missed the fact that Muslim fans had already clocked their use of Iblis and had started talking about it. And honestly, after the drama had dropped in its entirety in Netflix, at that point, it no longer mattered how good or bad or problematic audiences think this drama is, because it's already out. There is no opportunity for cancellation or to get the directors or writers to rethink the plot or make any kind of changes. So my personal theory on this is that they knew that the backlash would happen, which is kind of why they had very limited material presented for promotions. Like, I can't tell you how surprised I was that we got the entire series in one go. Like, that does happen with a lot of short Netflix series, but with a project of this size, the clear budget that has gone into, like, I don't know how much budget went into the actual production of the drama, but just look at the cast, the writer, the directors. A lot of money went into talent acquisition here. So given that budget, dropping the entire series like this, when they could have easily milked it episode by episode, but maybe that's just not a Netflix thing. I don't know. Okay, let's actually talk about the story of Genie Make a Wish. First, we have to tackle the demon in the room. So you guys may have noticed that some K-drama fans who are Muslims have pointed out that Kim Eun-sook's use of Iblis as her male lead is problematic. I don't think people are being able to understand why, because a lot of the discourse that I've seen online goes something like, a poster says, hey, it's problematic that she did this. I don't think I can watch it. And then 24 comments or replies under it basically saying, hey, you can switch it off. You don't want to watch it. This is a fantasy, not a religious drama. Hey, if Christians are okay with it, why aren't you okay with it? And basically along those lines. And I do think it's important to understand what the objections are. Me as a person who doesn't practice any faiths, I probably don't understand the gravity of this, but I can tell you what little I do understand, and I don't know, maybe that'll help. So the problem is that Iblis in Islamic theology is a very black character. He's not a morally grey character. He's not a fallen angel who still has a path open to redemption. He's basically had all the chances he could get. He is the embodiment of evil. There is not a shred of like human feelings or emotions in him. He's just like, he's really bad, the baddest of the baddest. But also, he's not a character to be experimented with. Even for someone like me who sees the stories in Bible and the Quran as parables, very important parables for humans, stories that have guided us for centuries and helped us have very deep, very important philosophical conversations about good and bad, but ultimately stories. Of course, I find it very easy to view a character like Iblis as eminently adaptable into a modern day hero who now has a morally grey heart and can have a redemption. But for a practicing Muslim, someone who uses this text and these beings as moral guidance, for them, this doesn't work. They can't see Iblis as a morally grey character. That is simply not the function of this being in their scripture, if that makes sense. There's also the matter of respecting a community's feelings towards their own theology. See, theology and folk tales are not the same thing. While I'm watching this drama, it has a pretty simple morality tale, and the way it's framed feels like it's something out of 1001 Nights or the Arabian Nights, which, by the way, was a compilation of folk tales from like West Asia, North Africa, Central Asia, and it was compiled starting from somewhere in the 8th century. And it was compiled over several centuries by different storytellers and translators from different languages. And finally, it was around the 18th century when it was translated into English, which is when the stories became even more popular because they were available in like this big binding, and it became the lens through which the West viewed Middle East And because the West viewed them that way, over the next few centuries, the rest of the world also started to view them in that way. And so, in our minds, when we think of that region, they are still living in the Abbasid Empire, which is like 800 AD, 900 AD. And imagine if your culture today was viewed through a lens that basically refused to move on from 12 centuries ago. Not great, yeah? That's kind of what the Arabian Nights has done for the Middle East, though. They've kind of made us get mentally stuck there. And consider the fact that in terms of literary traditions, Arabian Nights is far more important to the West than to that region in itself. Like, they know all the stories. They know the folk tales better than we do. And not just the ones that are compiled in the book, but many other folk tales. But there is a distinct difference between folk tales that have jinns in them and the jinns of theological works. And of course, Arabian Nights itself had its detractors, but overall it's not terribly important as something to get mad over or to admire. They're a collection of folk tales. All cultures have collections of folk tales. Like a few years ago, when Shannon Ali Chakraborty, who is an American, a Muslim American, wrote the series, I just read the first book, The City of Brass. It had like mixed reception, where some Muslims were really happy for the very detailed description of North African cities and different Muslim communities in the books. But there were Muslims who didn't like that it was based off not just folk tales, but also religious motifs. And that kind of mixture is always a place where a lot of conversation happens. And Muslims aren't just like a completely unified body about this either. A lot of them are okay with it. A lot of them think that people just need to do better research before they create fiction, especially historical fiction, based on their cultures, and especially if you are pulling from their religious motives. And then there are people who are like, hey, at least with the religion, none of it. Don't touch it. Which is why when Muslims, and Muslims who I know are pretty okay with adaptations otherwise, were like, why Iblis? I found that a very reasonable line to draw. Which is why if somebody is talking about it online and trying to explain why this was a problematic adaptation, and you have to understand something. Once someone crosses a line like this, a line that a community does not want crossed, other people will also find it easy to come in and do more adaptation work on this character. And that is exactly what the community would prefer you don't do. And very specifically, the issue that people had with this was that the backstory of Iblis was kept kind of text accurate. The fact that he's a very powerful jinn, the conflict with God, the refusal to bow to Adam, those things were kept very accurate. And not just accurate, there was like a massive info dump at the beginning of the drama, which I found very clumsy and disorienting. That was put in the drama in the first episode before even the intro card flashed. But the thing that they changed, that people have objections to, is turning him into a genie in a lamp. Genie in a lamp is not Iblis. And this is where you took folktale and theology and mashed it together, kind of believing that they are the same thing. Before moving on from this point, I just want to address two counterpoints to this complaint that Muslims have with this drama. One is, this is not a religious drama, this is a fantasy, so you can't complain. The problem, my friend, is that it's a fantasy. And also, are there a lot of religious dramas out there? I don't think there are. What have you been watching? But yeah, the fact that it is a fantasy is the problem. They are K-drama watchers. They can watch whatever the heck they want. And they get to complain about whatever the heck they want. Refer to my previous video. somewhere, and also improve your criticism. The second counterpoint is very interesting to me, which is that if Christians are okay with writers adapting Lucifer and creating, shows like Lucifer or Supernatural or any number of other stories from this character, then why should Muslims complain? And the structure of this argument is very problematic to me. If A agrees to something, why should B complain is not, the heck does that mean? The second thing is, have you considered the fact that the people who are adapting Christian scriptures into modern day retellings were often Christians themselves? They are very familiar with the works, and whatever backlash they were getting was from their own community. Whereas Muslims have had to watch people outside their community repeatedly come in, take their folk tales, take their religion, and try to create works out of that, often simply because they are looking for something fresh, something new, something that feels different. So it's garnishing for us. That is offensive. Come on. And if you take into consideration the history of K-dramas and how they have treated Muslim characters, it's not surprising that many people, without actually watching the drama, are writing it off, because that is the reputation you have created for yourself. And I'm going to put this here, even though I actually wanted to talk about this a little later. But the thing is, this drama has shown an intention to be sincere about the representation that they are doing. It's a very limited sincerity, but it's there. The amount of details that they have put in, they have really tried to be respectful. The problem is, and this is a problem that you would have realized if you actually had Muslim consultants, I think, especially non-Korean Muslim consultants on board, someone would have pointed out that you had so many opportunities to integrate not just the location of Dubai, but actual Arabs into the story. You could have given the role of Said, for instance, which I belatedly realized was probably supposed to be Syed. Yeah, that could have been an Arab man. Like, listen, South Korea has some 200,000 Muslims. 200,000. It would have taken very little for them to find an Arab actor. Even an Arab actor who doesn't speak Arabic well would have been better than not having any prominent Arab actors. Like, you have a story that is ostensibly based in Dubai, and you have like a big period that is based 1,000 years before that, and majority of the speaking roles went to non-Arabic people. You have the male lead and his sidekick wearing Korean faces. We never get to see any other versions of them. It would have taken very little to cast Arabic actors and just give us different faces to like really establish them in that land. But no, you have a guy who's decided 1,000 years before current time that the face of Kim Woo-bin is the face that he is going to stick to, because he had a premonition that it's going to be very popular 1,000 years from now. What? Anyway, I love Kim Woo-bin's face, so I am willing to hang my disbelief there. But you had so many other characters with minor speaking roles. Seriously. You cannot tell me that there were a dearth of Arabic-speaking people. Like, even if you couldn't cast actual Arabs, there are plenty of Muslims who speak Arabic fluently. They would have to, since they have to read the Quran in Arabic. Like, take for instance that small role in modern-day South Korea's police station, where Kim Woo-bin is trying to sort of pass himself off as a person who doesn't understand Korean, so he speaks some very basic... By the way, what was the joke with that? Why was he speaking Arabic 101 phrases? Like, were they trying to show a distinction between formal Arabic and informal Arabic, or like what was the joke there? I didn't get it. Anyway, so you have a police officer come out who understands Arabic. He speaks it very fluently, and from what I could see in the comments, apparently his Arabic was much better than any of the other characters. That was great. It was really nice to see a Korean policeman who can speak Arabic. That's great. He could have actually been of Arabic descent, though. Koreans have a perception that they are a monoethnic culture. They're not really. Their dramas, though, are very monoethnic. It's a very rare thing to see people of other colors there. This would have been an excellent opportunity. And also, I have a question. United Arab Emirates clearly had a tie-in with this drama. And it's hard for me to believe that they didn't vet the script. Where is your responsibility here, Dubai? Did you not push back at all? Like, why not ask them to cast Arabic people at least in speaking roles when the drama is supposed to be showing sequences in Dubai? Anyway, I'm an optimist. And I always think that more conversation that the fandom has about these things, the better it is for future productions. Anyway, so I really want a positive cycle of conversation here so that if a future drama sets the story in that region again, they do a better job of casting and general representation. There were so many minor characters in this drama. Some of them could have been non-Korean. This is why people are mad at you, Genie Make a Wish and Kim Eun-sook, because you Korean washed a story that took its major themes and characters from another country, but then refused to make space for that country in your drama. Okay, I think I got that out of my system, so I can actually talk about the story now. Okay, so now let's talk about the actual story. I did end up enjoying this drama after the episode 3. I think end of episode 3, if you guys watched it, you know the scene. Yeah, that point. After that, around episode 4, the drama seemed to become more steady. Like, it found its footing. The dialogue started to make sense. The scenes were merged properly, because before that, in the first 3 episodes, the editing kind of felt like there were scenes missing. There were connecting dialogues and interactions missing. Some of the jokes were, they stretched on. It was almost like a stand-up comic delivering a joke and then pausing to wait and see if you laughed. There were pauses that were very awkward. Some of it may have been deliberate because they were trying to create a mood where the genie is being jokey and Susie's character is giving him nothing. So it really was exactly like that, like a comic making a joke and then waiting to see if it lands. But it happened too often. And Susie wasn't even involved in many of these scenes. By the way, this drama loves its meta jokes. It cracked multiple on streaming. It wasn't even funny the first time they cracked it, so when they repeated it, it was even less funny. But very early on, there is a scene which is structured so badly. They are in Ga-young's room where she's apparently watching a Marvel movie, and Genie watches a scene and he's wondering if this is like the modern rendition of him, the great genie. And she's like, no, you're not Thor, you're not Iron Man, you're not whatever. So they're describing the characters instead of using the names, because as Ga-young points out, Netflix doesn't own the copyright to these characters. But here's the problem. We don't know what they are watching. Also, the framing of the scene is wide. So you have this tiny laptop, and it's the back of which is facing the audience, and you can't quite tell what they are looking at because Ga-young is looking at something else and not really paying attention to what's happening on the laptop. And the genie is sitting on her bed looking towards the laptop. But like it's such a small laptop from our perspective that the focus really isn't on it. So if you miss a single dialogue in that scene, and most of us who don't speak fluent Korean, we are depending on the subtitles. So if you miss a single subtitle which explains that he is referring to characters on the screen, which we can't see, by the way, because Netflix doesn't own the characters, then it's just this vague conversation about Netflix not owning some characters. And then suddenly Gayong is talking about the mouse, Disney, owning the copyright to Genie. And then in the next scene, Syed is writing a firmly worded complaint on Reddit about how unfair it is that Disney owns the copyright to Genie. Disney can't own the copyright to Genie, by the way, or to Aladdin, because these are folk tales. You can't own copyrights to folk tales that have existed in the public domain for centuries. Anyway, moving on. It wasn't funny. And I had to go back and reread some of the dialogues to even get context. Because, like, how could I be missing context to a joke? Jokes are usually the simplest part of any dramatic scene. Like, they are deliberately made simple so that the punchline isn't missed. Anyway, the punchline was that Genie is now being introduced to the comment section on Reddit. And it's, of course, criticizing him. And maybe it would have been funny if written by someone else, but this had the feeling of an older person criticizing a young people thing. Because it is an older person criticizing a young people thing, isn't it? And we are not referencing the Genie. There's also another meta joke at a later point where Kim Woo-bin's Genie has decided to woo Gayong, because that is how he will trap her or something. That plan lasts for like 2 seconds. So he puts on different characters from previous Kim Eun-sook projects and plays out scenes. The most recent one, of course, is Song Hye-kyo's character from The Glory, which most people would be able to identify. But then he uses his own character from The Heirs or Inheritance, and that's from 2013. I honestly don't know how many people in the current fandom has even watched The Heirs. Like, there was a point where people were entering the fandom in the 2018s, 2019s, and they were discovering Lee Min-ho, and they were going back and watching The Heirs. But like, since then, a lot of other people have come into the fandom, and I don't think it's a very relevant reference anymore. Like, the better reference would have been Goblin. And I'm actually surprised at the lack of reference to Goblin, simply given how much comparison there has been in media in general. As soon as this concept, this topic was announced in 2023. But yeah, like, a possible explanation might be that whoever owns the IP to Goblin may simply have refused to let them reference it, because it would have been so much more fun for Kim Woo-bin to act out Gong Yu's character and create a direct parallel there. But okay, never mind. Again, the point is, the references were cool for me as a drama watcher, but they added nothing to the actual drama. Kim Eun-sook knows how to write funny scenes. She's done it in so many of her dramas. Why is the humor here so labored? As an aside, instead of comparing this drama to Goblin, a better comparison in terms of like production and scale and the kind of storytelling that Genie Make a Wish ended up having, a better comparison would be to Habek, or Bride of Habek, which is this 2017 fantasy drama about a god of water, which is Habek, played by Nam Joo-hyuk. So he comes down to Earth for some reason. I don't remember the details of the story anymore. And he is expecting the descendant of his servant to basically make things comfortable for him, except that descendant is played by Shin Se-kyung, and she has no intentions of serving a god. And so the god kind of spends some time trying to persuade her, I think. Anyway, the first 4 or 5 episodes were really hard to get through. Just the story was plodding and it was awkward and was just not fun. And this was still that era of Shin Se-kyung's dramas where she was just the most passive and downtrodden heroine ever. She does become more spirited in the second half, which is why I still like her in this drama. But yeah, the beginnings of that drama were not fun. And wait, that is not the only parallel with Genie Make a Wish. The other one being the use of folk tales to create this world where you have elder beings walking amongst us. The interesting thing about Habek was the other gods in this world who were interacting with each other, and they had their petty misunderstandings and disputes and the godly stuff. And I did end up really liking Habek by the end of the story, and I really liked how they resolved the conundrum of how will an immortal have a romantic relationship with a mortal. I just liked how they chose to do it. And I have very similar feelings towards Genie Make a Wish. This could have been a very different kind of drama, given the amount of money that was poured into it, but it's not. It's a very simple story about this ancient being learning to respect humanity through the actions of exactly one human. This bothers me, by the way. Just from a storytelling perspective, it bothers me. This guy has not lived 1 millennium, 2 millennia, 3. No. He says he's lived millions of years, spent a majority of that in hell, come out, wandered around trying to tempt a lot of humans and pulled, according to him, thousands of people into hell until he met an 8-year-old who wished selflessly. And therefore kind of cemented herself in his memory as like the only human worth respecting. Which is fine. But here's the thing. Humans are really crappy and selfish. Humans are also unexpectedly selfless and very, very kind. And that kindness is more common than you would think in real life. So if you want me to believe that this elder being who has seen millennia of the world, has only found one human to respect in his entire lifetime, you have to give me a compelling backstory for why he was blind to goodness in humans before. Because according to this story that we are watching in this drama, Gayong's first wish basically asked him to give 3 wishes to like multiple other people, and like if 3 out of 5 of them are corrupted, then she will immediately make her other 2 wishes and whatever. They don't really stick to that practice, but it does become one of those things between them where is she right or is he right about like the nature of humanity. And Gayong believes that humans are essentially good and kind because her grandmother told her so. Not because she believes it, but because her grandmother told her so, which I find adorable for many reasons. We will come back to psychopath Gayong. I understand that she's not going to be disorder accurate, but I really enjoyed her character. But coming back to that bet, just in the period of the few months in which he was corrupting the souls of these 5 beings, 2 out of the 5 managed to remain uncorrupted all by themselves. Like there was the dog and there was the streamer dude. And with the third one, the classmate turned banker friend who was really jealous of Gayong, her third wish could have been selfish, but ended up selfless on a technicality because Gayong bought that wish from her. So I suppose she doesn't count. But even that leaves the one human who manages not to be corrupted by himself. Like, I'm just saying, statistically, it seems probable that this Jin has met many humans who have resisted corruption. So why is it that he only respects this one human? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, you have to give me a reason why it is that Genie feels like she is really special when there have been other humans who have done selfless deeds and managed to avoid being dragged down to hell. Like, even when he first met her, her brother, the one that she was trying to save, was trying to protect her. At a later point in the drama, Genie tells his ghost that you were also a really good human and you have my respect. The story itself has kernels of what I'm trying to say here, that Genie has met other humans who deserved his respect, but he managed to ignore that because he was so blinded by his prejudice. In which case, I need a better backstory to explain why he was blinded by prejudice and why this young girl changed his mind. I did like the part where he couldn't recall why he was trapped in the lamp, and that entire story about their romance that happened 1,000 years back. Also, the dynamic between Genie and the angel Azrael, who, by the way, has also been pulled from Islamic theology. I liked the way their dynamic was shown. The fact that the angel wasn't necessarily good, like he was really fixated on the job he thought he was given by the Almighty, and he wanted to get it done. No matter how it gets done, it needs to get done. The interactions that he had with Gayong were also a lot of fun for me. First of all, because Gayong was not impressed by any of the gods or fantastical creatures walking around her. She was like, yeah, okay, I know any or all of them can kill me at any point, but she is just so deeply apathetic to anything except for her grandmom that it kind of makes sense that she would be super unimpressed by everything that's going on. I don't know that psychopaths are necessarily that devoid of emotions, but hey, it's possible that they fall in a spectrum. And it's possible that Gayong was on a pretty extreme edge of that spectrum. Her walk into the past, where Azrael is trying to show her the moment where 8-year-old past her dies because of what Genie does. And it is pretty well done, that entire sequence in the past where they show Genie basically being malevolent. And throughout the drama, maybe because it's a Netflix drama, they were pretty okay with showing us Genie just being blatantly gruesome. Like, he thought nothing of letting hounds bite and tear into an 8-year-old child. Like, even if he was trying to scare her into making wishes, that was a pretty extreme action to take. And he does seem to look at that part of his life, like he remembers that, and he seems to look at that as one of his worst moments. Again, story-wise, I think that works pretty well. Like, we are talking about a being who's not a human and never will be a human. So him not having the same moral squeamishness about things like murder and violence makes sense. But I do think the story would have been a little more interesting if, as a Genie, he had a slightly inhuman perspective when dealing with humans in the modern day. Like, if he struggled with more than just modern technology, if he struggled with human morality or just human ways of seeing things. But I guess the writer didn't want two strange perspectives. They wanted one warm and one cold perspective. And in this drama, that cold perspective was the female leads, whereas the warm perspective was the male leads, who didn't have any problem understanding the heart and mind and worries and nuances of human life. Which, again, makes me wonder why he had a hard time seeing kindness and selflessness in humans, for a guy who understands humans as well as this Jin does. See, I am going to nitpick on stories because these are the parts of stories that really make my heart sing when they work well. So when they don't work, I'm like, oh, it's missing something. The romance, by the way, did not feel central to the storytelling. Like, there were quite a few scenes where Gayong and Genie were not even together. They were just off on their own, having their different conversations and their different adventures. It felt like every episode, like these moments where they would come together, have these conversations or interactions, or Gayong would just chase him around to beat him. By the way, this feels like such a 2010s joke of, hey, woman beats powerful magical man. Haha. Listen, Gayong's character is one who has restrained herself her entire life because she's following her grandmom's rules. But that doesn't mean that her urges have disappeared. Like the kid who wanted to dissect frogs for fun probably wants to dissect humans for fun as well. So I liked that the very first time she attacked the genie, it was after she had confirmed that he could fly. And so when he took her to a high rise, she pushed him, knowing that he would survive it. Though why he then went splat, I don't understand. Wouldn't he just have recovered mid-fall? Anyway, having now found a being who cannot be killed and cannot really be substantially hurt, it would have made a lot of sense if Gayong would have been a little obsessive about basically inflicting pain on him. And not just beating him when he makes her mad, but like actually being like, negotiating stuff she can do, like maybe cut his arm or something. Like at one point she does cut his arm off, which I found hilarious. That was amazing. That whole scene was great. Except for the fact that we see later on that she barely has to touch the string, the unbreakable string, for it to fall away. So why did she have to cut his arm? Probably because she just wanted to. As someone said, in one of the, I think on Reddit, Bae Suzy did an excellent Wednesday Addams. It was great. It was so fun. Which is why I think we got the dancing hand as well. That seemed like a reference. I do feel like there should have been those scenes of negotiation where he wants her to do something and she would be like, sure, in return, let me, I don't know, slice you up a bit. Or let me stab you. I want to see how that feels. Or something like that. It just would have made more sense because she's finally found a human who cannot be killed. A human-shaped being who cannot be killed. So it would have made sense for her to try and indulge her urges and curiosities that way. But the whole woman bashing the man and haha, this is so funny, was not haha so funny. It was really cringe, especially because that just becomes their dynamic. That becomes their romantic dynamic. How do they show affection towards each other? She chases him with something heavy to hit him with. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but like, come on. At least like shoot him or stab him or something. Just in general, I really liked the way Gayong's character was created. I liked the way her rules were. I liked how considerate she was towards her grandmom. I really liked the child Gayong being taught empathy by suffering physical pain. No comments on how science accurate any of this is. Probably not. But from a storytelling perspective, it was really good. It both showed the connection between the grandmother and the granddaughter and why the granddaughter is so attached to the grandmother. We are told at different points that Gayong doesn't have emotions, but we are shown by her actions that she has some emotions, definitely. Like she feels fear when she thinks about losing her grandmom. She makes preparations for life after her grandmom in a way that makes it very clear that this is not just about her survival, but it's about making sure that she doesn't do anything to break her grandmom's heart. And she doesn't trust herself to continue on the path that she has been on once her grandmom passes away. Like, I found those things so touching. In this entire drama, Gayong's character seemed to be the best thought out. Her relationship with Minji was also really lovely. The fact that Minji did want to do other things, but because some things were Gayong's routine and it was essential for Gayong to maintain that routine, Minji would crib and complain, but she would ultimately do whatever it was that Gayong wanted her to do. The fact that Gayong was able to create a relationship with Minji and the fact that she had an attachment to her grandmom says that she had emotions to a certain extent. Like her attachment to Genie also starts while she is in that state of muted empathy. So it's especially interesting where towards the end, her final wish is for her to feel all of the emotions that she hasn't been able to feel, like the full spectrum of those emotions. So all of the love, all of the guilt, all of the grief, and for all of it to crash into her at the same time. Like the death of her character felt slightly too convenient because they needed her to move on to being a genie. But at least that particular scene, like we had 12 and a half episodes of Gayong being a completely straight-faced, very difficult to read character. Like there are times when she's scared or when she is screaming, but none of it seems to touch her past a point. So when in the desert, the entire, like the volume of feelings that has always been held at bay, let's say, finally crashes into her and she is crying and like just crumpling into herself, it's a very, very effective scene. That was really good. Just performance-wise, but also the narrative built up that brought us to this point. And despite all of my cribbing about Kim Woo-bin's character, the backstory of it, like the certain illogical aspects to wish-making, because wish-making is so logical, but you guys know what I mean. I really liked Kim Woo-bin's performance as well. Like from the very first episode when he was making jokes about his very long hair and how he doesn't want to explain why he's clean-shaven. They were not funny jokes. They were not funny, but Kim Woo-bin was so personable and like he's clearly fully into his character. And there is something very watchable about a really good actor who has completely put himself into a character, no matter how silly or awkward the character is in the moment. It makes the scene watchable regardless of what the script is trying to do. And I think both Bae Suzy and Kim Woo-bin kind of make it work. Like those 3 episodes that were really hard for me to get through, and I kept switching it off and turning to something else and then coming back because I was like, I just want to see those 2 and let's give it a little more time. And then I got to the end of episode 3 where there is this finally a funny scene. Like it's an actually funny scene when Gayong asks him to kiss her because she's very curious about kisses and she's never been kissed. That entire sequence is actually funny. And what is even more funny is when Gayong is like, let's continue to kiss. And Genie is like, oh my God, my virginal lips, I must protect. And so he comes up with rules that you need to follow for your second kiss. I liked that. That was funny. That was genuinely funny. And I really liked how she was chasing him around to get the next kiss and trying to create situations where the perfect conditions for the next kiss would be met, because she's like, good kiss, let's do it again. And he, for whatever reason, maybe he just doesn't want to get attached to a human. It is not explained. He's like completely uncooperative until he's not. Like, I also really like their second kiss. Very cute. I think I might be able to enjoy this drama at a later point where my expectations have been reset to the correct level. And I'm not going into this just constantly going, what the hell, what the hell, what the hell, what the hell. Because I think too much of my brain space was taken up by that. There's a lot more I can say about the story, like the An Hyun-jin cameo as the very young grandmother. I really liked how Gayong's wish for her grandmother to become young again, as young as her, didn't necessarily extend her life. Like the drama does this over and over again, where they show us that a wish can be interpreted in different ways and it will not usually go the way you want it to go. This is, of course, a very old lesson that we have learned through many folk tales across the world. Be careful what you wish for is a warning for a reason. But I still really liked it whenever they did something like this. And in this particular case, I thought it was very clever. What I thought was less clever was that when the dentist sees Oh Pang-gyum's old dental x-ray and then compares it with Miju's dental x-ray, they look exactly the same. Like, it's exactly the same, that it's the same image. Like, it's impossible that they wouldn't at least be like slight differences in the way the face is held while the x-ray is happening. But also, Oh Pang-gyum's body didn't just externally go through changes, she became younger internally as well. Like, she has a wisdom tooth that is troubling her. She has the energy of someone in her 20s. So it makes no sense for her dental work to exactly be the same. Like, age would change some things. It wouldn't exactly be the same. It could be very similar and the doctor could still be like, wow, these sets are very similar, but it would not be the same image. These are what you would call consistency errors, which if you work in any kind of production, and when I'm not doing this, I work in audio production, figuring out consistency issues in scripts is a big part of pre-production. Like, there are people whose entire job is to not let these things happen. The things that I'm nitpicking over. That whole secondary storyline, like from the moment it started, I pretty much knew that Miju and Minji would not get a happily ever after. Partly because this is clearly written by someone whose writing style has remained in the 2010s, and you could not have lesbians having a happily ever after in the 2010s. And the time for this kind of like tragic representation, I think, is kind of past. Like, Korea is still conservative. Korean BL genre, while it's gaining momentum, it's still not mainstream the way it is in Thailand right now. But this just felt so very 2010s. At times I was wondering if Kim Eun-sook just dragged a script out of her rejected piles from a decade back and just revamped it for this drama. Anyway, I did end up liking the drama. I really liked Kim Woo-bin and Suzy in their characters in the drama. I absolutely adored An Yoon-jin as young grandmom. The transition from Kim Mi-kyung to An Yoon-jin was just unbelievably smooth. Like, she did such a good job of embodying the cadence of Kim Mi-kyung's speech and just the general grandmom vibe. It was excellent. I really do wish that they had actually allowed her relationship with Kim Min-ji to actually be romantic, even if it was tragic, but to actually let it be romantic. Instead, they kind of made it a matter of like suggestion, where Kim Min-ji has a crush on Miju, but Miju may or may not reciprocate, but most likely just sees her as this young person who's being very friendly. And like, that's fine, given the fact that there is a very real age difference there. But also, I don't know, like, if you're going to start to give me a romance there, like, just give me the full romance. Or don't start it. Oh, Syed and Iram, I really like the sidekicks. I also really like their dynamic with their individual bosses. Like, Iram's dynamic with Azrael said a lot about the kind of character this angel had. Like, he thought nothing of basically torturing her into obedience, because for him things are very black and white. It doesn't necessarily stop Iram from having opinions of her own or helping the people she wants to help. But at the end of the day, if you have spent your entire life being abused by your creator and master, you would have a certain type of personality, and Iram has that. Syed, on the other hand, is an extremely loyal cat. I really liked their use of the panther in fight sequences, and also the fact that both Iram and Syed had their own minions that they would get, like gossip from the day and the night. Oh, the one other thing that I liked, I'm just listing things I liked at this point, is that sequence where they show us that the entire village kind of contributed, like the old people in the village kind of contributed to raising Gayong, like teaching her different things, basically keeping her too busy to kill animals. It was really nice. Like it's not like they are not judgy. The neighborhood is very judgy, but they are also simultaneously accepting. That was a very human storyline. Like, yeah, when problematic kids are being brought up in larger families, you have a lot of adults keeping an eye on the kids. Less scope for those kids to be able to get away with doing crappy things. Those were the benefits of like larger families. Plenty of cons. I have faced both, but I have to admit that I found this aspect like really endearing, because it's very believable. Okay, yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up the video here. This was very disorganized. I just had like hot off the press thoughts that I wanted to get out into this recording. And yeah, let's continue the conversation below. If you guys actually did manage to watch the whole drama, tell me your thoughts about it. Like, if you had other reservations that I have missed, point them out. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.